Morning, everyone. This is the Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. Meeting today also as the Land Conservation Committee. And I see by our screen that we have all committee members present, including our board chair, Dave Bartlett. So we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes from January 26th.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. Any questions, corrections? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. Carries. We have a public hearing today to start things off with. So I will, let's see. I will call the hearing to order. And note again that all members of the committee are present. This is a hearing to rezone a piece of property in Red Cedar Township. I'll ask Mr. Colson to provide an explanation of the request.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll start by just the reading of the public notice, and then I will go briefly through the staff report, and then take questions, and then turn it back over to the committee for deliberation. So, in accordance with the provisions of Section 19.84 Wisconsin statutes, public notice is hereby given to all residents in the town of Red Cedar and to all residents of Dunn County that the Dunn County Planning, Resources and Development Committee will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, February 9, 2021 at 8:30 a.m. And the meeting will be held by teleconference. Dunn County, as a correction to the mapping component of the comprehensive rezone, has made a request to rezone a parcel of land from R2, residential 2, to general commercial GC as described as follows. All of lot 3 of certified survey map number 4007 recorded in volume 19 of certified survey maps on page 117 as document 595234, located within the northwest 1/4 of the southeast 1/4 of section 6, town 28 north, range 12 west, all in the town of Red Cedar, Dunn County, Wisconsin. This notice was we got certification from the paper. This notice was published on the dates that went in for. And so, if you without any objection from the chair, I could go into the staff reports.
Please do.
So this is really a correction. When we went through the rewrite way back in 2013, we met with most of the towns, or all the towns, or some of the towns. But anyway, we worked with towns that wanted to on how they wanted their towns rezoned, and those maps that we worked on. Some of the towns adopted those into their comprehensive land use plan. Red Cedar was one of those towns, and so we worked with the town, and we came to consensus on how the town of Red Cedar would be zoned, and the town passed a resolution, on September 8, 2014, and they came under county zoning. And then last month, December 30, Todd Sens contacted my office and was questioning if his land was zoned correctly. I brought up the map and said, well, it looks like, you have 2 parcels that are general commercial and one that is residential too. And he indicated that was incorrect, that the town had a map, and he was there, and that all those parcels were supposed to have been general commercial. I told him I'd look into it, but regardless, you know, if it is incorrect, it's going to take a rezone in order to resolve the issue. And so I did go to the town of Red Cedar meeting, and well, first of all, I had conversations with the town and with Mr. Sins, and we discovered that indeed the parcel was mapped incorrectly on our map. And so I went to the town because for rezones, we need to get the town's opinion on these rezones, even though they had already back in 2014 had adopted county zoning, and they thought that this map was already taken care of. So they had already passed on that. I still needed to go back and make sure that they didn't have objections to this rezone, and they were in support of, and I have the minutes from the from that meeting. So we scheduled this public notice today, and Tom, if I could go to map 5.6. There we go. So this is how our zoning currently looks, and the parcel that is highlighted, you know, the R2 parcel, that's the one that was supposed to have been general commercial. And now, Tom, if you can go to the other map, please. This is the map of what we worked on with the town, and you can see that those three parcels that where Tom's hand is right now, they had agreed that was going to be general commercial. Somewhere in the mix, that parcel got colored incorrectly. I don't know that we won't find other pieces of land in the county that were adopted incorrectly. But when we find an issue that is clearly the county's issue, you know, we mapped this wrong, we'll take care of it. And I assured Mr. Sins that we would take care of it. Although normally a rezone would be at the request of the applicant. And so I'm here today to ask the committee to consider rezoning the land from R2 to general commercial, and it would be lot 3 of certified survey map 4004 would be the piece of land that we're going to rezone. This would come before the county board for action, and once the county board passes it, then we will recolor that piece, assuming that it passes to general commercial, and we can move on with life. So with that, that's pretty much the overview of why we're here, what happened, and maybe what staff is recommending the committee do. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Quinn. And if there's questions from the committee, I will certainly do my darndest to answer them.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. Are there any, Tom and Krista, is there anyone requesting to speak at the hearing on this topic?
We did have one request just for a public comment, and she has not arrived yet.
Okay. So I guess what we will do then is, are there any questions from the committee? Then we'll close the public hearing, and without objection, to get this off the table, just move the consideration of action on this map correction, which is number 10, up to this point in the agenda. Any object to that? So we're on now formal board, or out of the hearing, we're on formal committee consideration of taking action on this map correction request. Any questions, discussion? Could I get a motion from the committee to approve?
Supervisor Bjork will make that motion that we go from the R2 back to the general commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Bjork. Is there a second?
Supervisor Kinnear will second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, could we just have them read into the to the motion that it is for lot 3 of certified survey map 4007?
Without objection, that will be the way the motion will read.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries, and we'll forward that to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We had, Krista, you said we had a request for public comment.
We did, but they have not arrived in the meeting.
Okay. Well, then let's move on with our agenda. So just to facilitate the time of staff and other people who are working with us today, if we could maybe make a few tweaks to the agenda order, that would be appreciated. I would suggest that after item 6B, we move up items 8 and 9 for discussion and review, and then come back at the end of the meeting to do the review of the draft land division ordinance. Any concerns about that? Okay, then that's what we'll do. So the next item then would be 6A, Register of Deeds monthly report. We have it on the screen. Any questions of Heather on this? Okay, let's move down to environmental services report, division reports. Chase's report. Move on. Planning and zoning. Any questions? Or if staff wants to make any comments, that's fine too. Solid waste and recycling. Any questions? Planning and survey division. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
In your report, it talks about ordering a Dodge pickup. Can you tell me where you went for the bids on that, please? Sometimes I get questions on that.
Yes, so I ended up getting 3 separate bids. One was from Northtown Ford, one was from Kai Chevrolet, and one was from Gilbert's of Sand Creek. And Gilbert's of Sand Creek came in the lowest of the 3 by a considerable margin.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Supervisor Kinnear here for
Yes.
Carlson. Tom, when you go to your surveying conference, you usually come back and give us a little report and kind of tell us about some exciting things. Is that going to happen sometime in the future here?
Sure, I can do that. I'm not prepared right now. I can say the conference was quite different this year. Obviously, it was remote, and you lose something by not having that personal connection. But it was still, very valuable. I'd rather do it remote than miss out on it. There was a lot of, obviously very good topics and very good speakers. Yeah, certainly I can give you an update at the next meeting on on the sessions I attended. You know, obviously you can't attend all of them. The nice thing is they were all recorded this year. So up until, I believe it's April 27th, those recordings are going to be available. So I certainly have plans to go back and watch some of the sessions I couldn't attend. So often what happens is there's 3 really good topics at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, and you can only sign up for one and you miss the other 2. So, but yes, I can certainly provide the committee with an update at our next meeting in 2 weeks. Be happy to do that.
And Mr. Chair, I don't mean to put something on the agenda. I was just curious if Tom was going to talk about it because it's been fun to listen to it. And I saw the one where now they're starting to correct for the movement of the Earth's crust. That's crazy. But anyway, thank you for what you do, Tom.
Yes, and just to expand on that real quickly, you know, surveyors work in mainly X, Y, and Z coordinates, right? You've got your horizontal position and your vertical. Well, now they're introducing, or National Geodetic Survey is introducing a 4th component, which would be velocity or movement over time. So not only going forward, not only will we be recording our X, Y, and Z horizontal, vertical, but also an epoch in time when the measurement was taken. So we can compare measurements, you know, 5 years apart, 2 months apart, 15 years apart. And it all has to do with crustal movement and increases in technology. So I never honestly thought we'd be at this point in my career. And I only wonder what's coming up in the next 20, 25, 30 years from now. Things are really changing.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I really enjoyed having the program available and looking at all the interesting sessions. Very good. Anybody else? Any questions of any of the staff on the reports? Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Then we'll move, if it's okay, as we decided, we'll move down to number 8, consideration of tax foreclosure properties. Barbara?
So there is there was one property with a building on that is still in the open, that moved into the open bid stage. No bidders bid the minimum bid that the committee had established at $70,000. This property is a 10.32 acre property in the town of Hay River. Two bids came in, $40,000 from Amy Drinkin, Richard Kuzlik, Jeff Kuzlik, and Ann Kuzlik. They're all family members. And then an adjacent neighbor also bid, Brian Andrews bid $27,777.77. So to give some background, because obviously both of the bids are significantly less than what the minimum bid was established. Just quickly, I pulled the appraisal report again, and the appraisal report was he more or less admitted that it was a tough property to appraise, and just went based on comparables in the area, and a lot of them weren't necessarily nearby either. The structure has a significant amount of damage to the roof, and has everyone that looked at it noted the potential for water damage in the boards because it's a log cabin, and it was so those are things that people noticed, and kind of just showing a difference between the appraisal report. The back taxes when the property was foreclosed on were only for 2018. And that with interest and penalty was just under $5,000, so $4,953.18 in the back taxes. And the taxes had been accruing naturally at about $300, $3,200 per year. And so the recommendation is to accept the bid from Amy Drinkin, Richard Kuzlik, Jeff Kuzlik, and Ann Kuzlik on parcel 20-03 for $40,000.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Anyone want to make a motion one way or the other on this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the staff recommendation to award the bid of $40,000 to Amy Drinkin and the others.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Anderson will second.
Thank you, Jim. We have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion carries, and we made the decision on accepting that bid. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Number 8B, budget carry forward request from Land, Water, Conservation, and Zoning. Chase, you can take us?
Sure. Yes. Good morning, everyone. So as you know, I'm new, getting familiar with the system here and the processes that we need to take place for our budget, carrying funds forward from last year into this year. And before you is a sheet that describes several different areas that we need to carry those funds forward. One of those is the multi-discharge variance fund. This is for projects within the Red Cedar watershed, funds that municipalities contribute to in order to reduce phosphorus loading. The second would be related to our PL 566 watershed structures, the Knights Creek structures, and some maintenance and repairs that need to be conducted on that that were not able to be completed in 2020. The next one would be a snowmobile trail aid grant, carrying funds forward to be consistent with state activities and local snowmobile activities, carrying those into 2021 as well. And then finally would be a federal grant through the National Association of Conservation Districts for technical assistance funds, carrying those funds forward into 2020 to finish up that grant and projects associated with it. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have on specifics, but basically this is our request to carry those funds from last year's budget into 2021.
Thanks, Chase. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Well, Chase, welcome. Thank you. Good to have you aboard. Is there any special thing you have to do to carry a federal grant forward, or is that already funds we have and not all we have to do is approve it and it's done?
Yes, my understanding is with this type of grant is they usually are either 1, 2, 3-year grants. They have a longer time frame, and any extensions that we would need to make with those grants through NACD or the federal government, we would be able to handle that in addition to this. But for the most part, it's my understanding that these funds are already in place to be carried forward on their end for 2021. So it's just a matter of our bookkeeping to keep up with it.
Thank you, Chase.
Any further questions? We have a motion to approve this request.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve this.
Supervisor Anderson, thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I will second.
Thank you. Supervisor Morehouse seconds. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Motion carries.
Thank
Mr. Colson, you have a request.
Yeah, so we have sent this is for our filing system of getting our sanitary and zoning documents scanned in and then indexed so that we could search them electronically, and so that we could give permission to other people to search those files electronically. It should be a great help when it's finished. It's going to take some time. So this money, $38,000 was approved as a contingency fund request last year. Came before this committee as a contingency fund request, and it was supported, and then it was approved. We knew at the time of the contingency fund request, and I believe we spoke about this at the committee, that this money was not going to be spent in 2020, that it was going to be finished up in 2021. So they did come. US Imaging, we had 2 bids on this, and US Imaging was awarded the bid. They did come. On the 26th, they came and got our files. We boxed them all up. They took them. We've actually had a couple of requests from plumbers to get information. So we've already been corresponding with US Imaging. They found the files we need, scanned them, sent them back to us. We need to continue that work with them, and then allow them time to scan the documents, run it through some tests, and then get it indexed into our GCS system. Really thinking that that this is still going to take 4 or 5, maybe 6 months in order to get this whole thing completed. And so that $38,000 is needed for them to continue that project. So I'm asking that the committee support this carry forward request so that we can have the money in this year's budget to continue that project.
Thanks, Bob. Any questions from the committee? We've talked about this before, but any questions? Okay, could I have a motion to approve this request?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Kinnear here, I move we approve the request. Carry the
Supervisor
money
Kinnear
forward.
moves and Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you for your support.
Thanks a lot. And let's see, that takes care of item 8. Item 9, A and B, a review of 2020 damage program crop prices, and then review of 2020 program claims. And Alex is back again this year to go through this with us. So I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Tom, can you scroll down to a different page, this one? So just as a refresher for everybody, the Wildlife Damage Abatement and Claims Program is a DNR funded program that is administered by the county, and Dunn County opts to contract with my agency, USDA Wildlife Services, to do the administration on behalf of the county. Last winter, when I came before this committee to set crop prices and to approve or deny damage claims, there was a request to exclude harvest costs from the commodity prices or from the final claim number. And I reached out to DNR's leadership and spoke with DNR legal. And what I was told, I was sent a bunch of lines of statute and administrative code. So just to summarize this page rather than read it line for line, is that the county's role is to just set a fair market value for the crop. We are restricted from excluding or including any ancillary expenses, including planting or harvest expenses. So I just wanted to, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability, but I wanted you guys to know that I did follow up on your request and was basically told that legally the county doesn't have the authority to exclude harvest expenses from the claim numbers of crop prices. So I kind of summarized that a bit on this page, and I just wanted to go through this before we dove into the actual crop price numbers.
Okay.
So there's 2 actionable items when it comes to the damage program. The first actionable item is the approval or setting commodity prices. And then we actually go to the claim. So by approving prices or setting prices, we're not, approving individual claims yet. We're just putting the commodity prices on record. So there are 4 claims in Dunn County, and those involve soybeans, corn, a number of pumpkins and squash, and there was some apiary damage from black bear. If you look down below here, there's crop price sources. That summarizes how I came to these numbers. For the grains, it's easier to get a bigger picture crop price. For the smaller stuff like apiary equipment, honey, pumpkins, the standard procedure for setting those prices is to just go off the invoices and the bills of sale from the individual producers and use that number. So I gathered all that information from enrolled producers, and these are the prices I came up with, and they're open for discussion. You guys can tweak them if you want. If you want to just view this as a starting point, but these were fair numbers I came up with, and my recommendation would be to approve, but you can certainly change them if you'd like.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. The committee have any questions or comments on the proposed prices?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Stan.
I just want to compliment Alex on teaching me a new word, which I had to go to my dictionary to look up as I reviewed this. Pronounce it, please, Alex.
Well, then I would reveal that I had to look up that word myself, and I don't actually know how to produce.
I looked at that yesterday and said, "What is this?" Never heard it.
I think it's cucurbits, but I was just looking for something that's included both squash and pumpkins. I think watermelons would fall under that as well.
That is correct pronunciation.
Cucurbits. Okay.
Well, we'll double check both of you, all three of you, and find out next month whether or not you're right. Any other questions?
Vine crops, cucurbits.
Okay.
That's what I thought it was, yeah.
Supervisor Bjork, for the grain prices.
Yes, Gary.
2020 was a pretty bad year for prices, but then starting like in September and October, they went really a lot better. So right now, soybeans is probably about $13.30, and corn is over $5 a bushel. So I think we should take some consideration of what the value is right now, because we're kind of going on 2020 crops right now, or 2021 is what they're worth. So I don't know if we could kind of take the average of that and what the price is right now and put that as an average price. Because I don't see the prices the way it looks going down considerably from what they are right now at that $13.30 for soybeans, and I think it's $5.15 the last I looked for corn. So maybe a guy could take the difference between the price proposed and the current price to get a price approved.
Mr. Chair,
let me crunch some numbers real quick. So the average of those figures you gave me, and the averages, or the price per bushel I presented here, that would bring the soybean price to $11 per bushel and the corn price to $4.24 a bushel.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that a motion.
Okay.
For the price approved.
Mr. Chairman, I will second it, and then I'd like a comment.
Yeah, we'll have some discussion. So we're clear about the motion. Alex, could you repeat those numbers?
Soybean price would be $11 per bushel. Corn price would be $4.24 per bushel.
So that's the motion, and we have from Supervisor Bjork, and we have a second from Supervisor Anderson. Any discussion from the committee on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If I might?
Yes, please, Jim.
Supervisor Bjork brought up the question I was going to ask, if this was only for the year of 2020, because he is absolutely correct. Soybeans has skyrocketed, as has corn, to the prices that Supervisor Bjork suggested. And so that's why I'm glad he brought that up. Now, not only grains, but I'm familiar with the honey and the hive equipment as well, but not familiar with the prices of the cucurbits. And I don't know if we're just talking about grains at this particular point. And I have not researched or followed up on what the honey, but those might equally be changed and need to be looked at as well. That's my concern. I certainly agree with grain. However, I thought we were approving only for the year of 2020. And now how long are we, this approval is for the prices for what, the year of 2020?
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead and explain.
So the damage these producers incurred was in the year of 2020. I wait until the winter and it usually spills over into the following year to come before you to get prices approved, just to try to account for any late fluctuation in the market or any late claims that trickle in. You know, if I came before you in December to do this and we had some stored feed damage from deer, I'd have to come back before you and do another claim for 2020. So the prices are supposed to reflect the market value of the crop in 2020, not necessarily 2021. I know that gets complicated for grain, you know, if these producers sold in October or they're holding it right now to sell in 2 months. So that's always a little confusing. As far as the pumpkins and squash and honey, you know, for the pumpkins, that producer, he sold prior to Halloween. So I know the exact price he received for the undamaged crop. So I don't think, I wouldn't recommend adjusting that one. As far as apiary equipment and honey, it's hard to say when you would sell the honey, but the damage to the hive equipment, the structural damage and the loss of the bees that occurred in 2020, and those prices were given to me by invoices from that honey producer, and he was perfectly comfortable with those prices. So even if they're maybe a little lower than they would be in the coming months, you know, that it's a number he's comfortable with. So I don't, if that was playing into your justification for changing it, I wouldn't worry about that, at least.
No, I appreciate that explanation. I just wanted to be sure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, Alex, to be clear about the motion, the $11 figure, were you using so the 870 is the average price based on the highest price in 2020 and the lowest price in 2020. Is that?
So if you look down below for crop price sources, the National Agricultural Statistics Service produces a number for the average monthly price received for soybeans for each month. So when I put this together, there were January 20 through November 20 were the dates available, so that it didn't include December of 20. So I took each of those 11 numbers and averaged them together to get that 870 and that 332. And there are other ways of doing this. You know, I could have looked at prices from local mills, or
so
it's just, you know,
the $11 number that you pulled that you provided us came from doing what?
Supervisor Bjork gave two numbers to me of what the prices are for these commodities now. You know, there's a huge increase over the past couple months going into this winter, and he requested that I average my number with those numbers. And so he gave me $13.30 for soybeans, $5.15 for corn, and I just averaged those with these two.
Okay.
So those prices he gave me could be, you know, you could make the argument those are 2021 prices, but again, with grain, it's possible, unlike the pumpkins, they didn't sell in October. They're still holding that grain and are expecting that price of $13.30 and $5.15. So I think there is a decent argument that that's an appropriate adjustment to make.
You can make an argument that this is an unusual year that had the actual year monthly average is significantly lowered by the range that we had this year.
Right.
So we do have, is that calculation relatively consistent with the methodology that's used elsewhere? Are there any problems with us doing that?
No, I don't think so. Some committees have made that argument before, and
Okay.
I've agreed with it, and the DNR has never brought up issue with it.
Okay.
You know, it's not as simple with grain as this was the price in October 2020. This is what we're going to do. So,
okay.
I don't see any issue.
Thank you. Any other questions by the committee? So we have a motion and a second to substitute those two new prices. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 I should have actually, is there anyone opposed? Okay, I should have, I guess I meant to include well, Gary's motion was specifically with regard to grain. So now we've changed the grain prices. Are there any other changes people would like to make? Could I have a motion to accept all these prices with the amended grain prices?
Yes,
Come
certainly, Mr. Chairman, I will move approval of the crop prices as amended.
Thank you, Diane. Is there a second for that?
Anderson will second it.
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No? Okay. Okay, Alex, tell us what we owe.
Well, first, I just wanted to show you this page here. This is a summary of the enrollees in the county. And I wanted to show you that, one, for your own information, and two, to show you what the prescribed abatement was for the four claimants. The four claimants are Paul Kohler, Apiary Bear. Prescribed abatement is temporary electric fence. He had a solar fencer fail. I think it might have been a battery issue. So we just replaced the solar fencer and the commodity was protected again. So he implemented my prescribed abatement. It wasn't negligence on fence maintenance or anything like that. Stan Larson is the second claimant. He was prescribed a shooting permit for removing deer. He met all the harvest objectives on his permit. He allowed public hunting on the enrolled parcel. So there's no issue there with prescribed abatement. Carol White was the third claimant. He had goose damage to corn. His non-lethal abatement were pyrotechnics for hazing, and he was also issued a shooting permit. No issues with public hunting access, no issue with abatement prescription. And the fourth was Gene Gutman, the pumpkins and the squash. He was issued a shooting permit. He shot deer. He met his harvest objectives. He met his public hunting access requirements. So, you know, the only justification there would ever be for denying a claim per state statute would be failure to allow public hunting or failure to implement the agent of the county, myself's prescribed abatement. So no problems there in terms of their responsibilities within the wildlife damage program. So the next page, I'll answer any questions anyone has, but the next page would be the actual claim numbers.
Anyone have any questions about those claims?
Supervisor Bjork has a question.
Yes.
Any idea how many deer were shot with the shooting permits?
You know, let me make a comment on that, Supervisor Bjork. I have a friend that hunted up in New Haven, or went up to New Haven alone, and he shot 12 deer under that permit. Just one friend I know from Menominee. And he knows of people that I don't know how many total he said, but he shot 12. Gave all the meat to the food pantry.
In terms of total numbers for all the shooting permits for Dunn County, I could get that figure for you. I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to pull some data out of the DNR's database. Stan Larson shot 25 deer on his permit. Well, there were 25 deer shot on his permit. He didn't necessarily shoot all of them. You can share those tags with other people as long as they're only used on the enrolled parcel. I believe Gene Gutman, he's only on a small 4 or 5 acre parcel right outside the city limits of Menominee. So his harvest objective, total tag allotment is much lower. I believe he shot 8 deer, but that's all on 2 acres of corn or pumpkins on a 5 acre parcel. So he put the work in to abate his damage.
So on these shooting permits, is there a limit for each permit? Can you only shoot so many? I mean, you go out there and look at the size of the acreages and the size of the crop, and then there's a limit to how many that can be harvested?
Yeah, so there is a formula that accounts for the size of the enrolled parcels, the percentage of the land that is suitable deer habitat, and then it also takes into account my testimony from doing the site visits in terms of deer sign I see on the property, the scale of the damage. To be eligible for a shooting permit, you either have to have incurred over $1,000 worth of damage or be likely to incur over $1,000 worth of damage. So I go to these properties and confirm that they're an actual agricultural producer. You can't get a shooting permit if you've got 1/10 of an acre of sweet corn in your backyard. And I confirm the damage extent, and then the DNR does the calculations on the formula, and that formula also accounts for what they believe is the deer density per square mile. So there's a lot of science that goes into that number. It's not just shoot as many deer as you want. And those permits have harvest objectives attached to them. They're required to shoot 50% of their quota within 45 days of the day of issuance and 80% of their tag allotment by the end of the calendar year. So, we don't want to issue these tags for people just to save until November to fill their freezer with venison. We want, it's a land management practice. It's not supposed to be sporting opportunity. So we want them, if they have damage, we put that 45-day objective on them. So they're removing deer regardless of time of year to minimize their claim.
So are the deer harvested, are they strictly does, or can they be bucks also?
Antlerless only. There is, per state statute, you could make, the DNR biologist for the county has the authority to make an antler deer exemption, but I've never seen it done. The objective isn't to remove every deer on the property. As anyone on this committee that's a deer hunter, you know how susceptible these animals are to hunting pressure. So we just want to remove enough deer to change the movement patterns, get them out of the crops, and it's usually, you can usually do that just by shooting antlerless deer, and that also minimizes, negative public perception of these permits or conflict with neighbors. We don't want people removing mature bucks from in July in the state of Wisconsin. You'd have a stirred up bee's nest on your hands.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, go on, Alex.
All right, if you could scroll down to the next. So this will get a hair complicated now. So Mr. Chair, I'm hoping, obviously, these total claim numbers for Stan and Carol have changed based on the new commodity price. So I could crunch numbers on this. It would take me 4 to 5 minutes, or I'm hoping when you do the motion to approve, you can just say,
yeah, we're
going to approve these prices based on the new. Okay.
Yep.
So these are their total claim numbers. You'll notice a discrepancy between appraised damage and the claim. There's a $500 deductible for a damage claim. And if you have over $5,000 worth of damage, any amount of damage over 5,000, you only get paid on 80% of that. So for Stan Larson, you'll notice there's more deducted than 500. That's accounting for the $500 deductible and the 80% adjustment for over 5,000. So Gene and Paul Kohler's claim numbers are reflective of those commodity prices, and Stan and Carol's are going to be adjusted based on those new commodity prices. And like I said, they allowed public hunting. They implemented my prescribed abatement, good communication. No issues based on the statutes and administrative code governing the damage program. I'd recommend you approve these claims.
Could I have a motion to approve these claims based on the amended pricing amounts?
Supervisor Kinnear here. I move that we approve this based on the amended amounts.
Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork will second that motion.
Supervisor Bjork, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, the motion carries. Anything else, Alex?
One more thing, if you do recall, last year I mentioned that there is some pending legislation that would change how this program is administered. Specifically, there was legislation to remove county administration from the program to make the program exclusively, it would be administered by the DNR. They still intended to contract with USDA Wildlife Services to administer the program. That legislation died in the Senate last year when COVID hit, but I got word yesterday that that legislation has been reintroduced. And if that were to pass, it would remove, the DNR would administer the program. So your role in setting crop prices and proving claims would be gone. This 2021 would be the final year of county administration of the program. So if I can send out an email, I could send that to Chase and he could pass it on to any of you that are interested in reading about it more in detail. But I wanted to bring that to your attention in case you have any concerns and wanted to contact a legislator or contact the DNR for more information.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for your work and for coming to our meeting, Chase, Alex.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Good, appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, I think we've cleaned up the agenda except for going back to item 6C, review of the draft land division ordinance. Mr. Carlson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've talked about the classification of land divisions, I believe now at our last 3 meetings or so. And we are making some progress, but we, I guess, still haven't decided on a policy moving forward. So I'm just gonna start by going through we're down to 3 options right now. And I'm just gonna go through those again really quick at a high level, and then I will open it up for discussion by the committee. So one of the options, option A, was number of splits per 40 over time. So as you can see over time, I can do 4. The example here is showing 4 splits, and so I have 2 40s. On year 1, I can do 4 splits on each one of my 40s for a total of 8 lots. I wait 5 years, I can do the red splits here. And these are just the splits I have designed. You know, obviously a landowner might decide to divide the property differently, but the point I'm trying to make is that in the first year I can do 8 lots. On year 6, I can get up to 16 lots, and if the topography allows, I can keep dividing this property in 5-year increments, 4 lots per 40 every 5 years. So on a very, very good site that's well managed, not a lot of environmentally sensitive areas or steep slopes, things I would have to account for, access, I could end up with quite a few lots here over time. Okay, that's one option. Option B, this was using a density ratio, okay, 8:1, as applied to the entire contiguous tract. So my example, again, I have 240s, I have 80 acres. I do the math, I'm allowed 10 splits ever for the life of the parcel. But I'm still only allowed to do, whether we decide on 4 or 5, I'm just going to use the number 4 for now, but I can do 4 splits there every 5 years. So I would do my lots 1 through 4. I'd wait till year 6. 5 years have passed. On year 6, I do lots 5 through 8. And then on year 11, I can do lot 9 and 10, and I'm done. If I'm in a zoned township and I want to make more lots, I do have a mechanism available to me. I can petition the county for a rezone and rezone this property, this contiguous tract, into a residential district that would allow me to get away from the zone or the density requirement, and I could make many more lots out here. If, however, I'm in an unzoned township, I would not have that same mechanism available to me, and the most I would ever get on this 80 acres, for example, would be 10 lots. If I had 40, it'd be 5 lots. So it's a simple math calculation, and it's a finite number. That number cannot change. I know going into this game how many lots I'm going to have for the life of this parcel, especially if I'm in an unzoned township. Whereas if we go back to option A, I'm not limited by a density ratio. And if the land lends itself properly to development, I could end up with, many more than the number of lots based on the 8:1 density ratio. So that's option B. And then option D that we explored at our last meeting, and now I have developed another sketch. At our last meeting, I didn't have a very good illustrative example of option D. So this was my attempt at option D. And again, it's my configuration. It certainly could be done differently. I've got, some pretty large lots on here. So option D, and I'm just going to go back into the ordinance draft itself. So option D is creation of a lot smaller than 20 acres from a contiguous tract shall require a certified survey map. A maximum of 5 lots smaller than 20 acres may be created within that contiguous tract in a 5-year period. Additional lots must be created by county plat or state plat. So maximum density for contiguous tracts subject to county zoning shall meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Contiguous tracts that are not subject to county zoning, so in other words, unzoned townships, they shall have no maximum density requirements. So if we look at that from an illustrative perspective, this is what could happen. And I tried to illustrate 2 adjoining landowners. So Mr. Smith has 40 acres, that's his contiguous tract. Mr. Jones has 340s, okay? He's got 120 acres. And I'm just trying to show graphically what the differences are between the 2 owners. So, and I apologize for the red. I thought it was gonna come out a little better than it has on here, but so if we look at both Jones and Smith, they're contiguous tracts, and again, we're applying the number of splits here against the entire contiguous tract instead of option A. So option A is different. It's similar, but it's different. Option A, we're saying you can do so many splits in a 5-year period on each one of the 40s in your contiguous tract, okay? Because a contiguous tract can contain multiple 40s. Option D has a subtle difference. We're applying the same principle, but to the contiguous tract and not to each 40 within that contiguous tract. So if we look at Smith and Jones, they're both developers. On year 1, they can create 5 lots within their contiguous tract. And we're assuming they're going to use the certified survey map route. Obviously, if they're going to use a county plat or a state plat, then the rules change. But for the sake of argument, they're developers. They want to go down they want to use a certified survey map as the vehicle to accomplish these land divisions. So on year 1, they both come into my office and say, what can we do with our property? We don't want to do a plat. So I advise each one of them, well, we've adopted option D in our land division ordinance. Mr. Smith, you can do lots 1 through 5. You can do 5 lots on your 40. I don't care where you put them. They each have to have access. You can make them as large as you want, but they have to be a 1 acre minimum lot size. Mr. Jones, you can do the same thing. You can put 5 lots anywhere within that 120 acres. So they decide to create the 5 lots designated here in green on year 1. They're both done. They can't do any more lots through the certified survey map process until 5 years expires. So one thing that might come up is, well, you know, Mr. Jones, hey, he makes the argument, I've got 120 acres. You're telling me I can only do 5 lots just like Mr. Smith? And the answer would be yes. You've got a lot more land, but you're still allowed the same number of splits because we're applying it against the contiguous tract. And I would advise Mr. Jones that, well, yes, the advantage to having more land is you have longevity. In the long term, you're going to be able to create many more lots on your property than Mr. Smith. He's going to run out of usable land within time because he simply has less land. And, you know, he has to maintain a minimum lot size of 1 acre. The numbers work out in your favor, but it's going to take you longer to accomplish things. So on year 1, we get lots 1 through 5 on each one of these contiguous tracts. Then on year 6, so after 5 years goes by, they can each do 5 more lots. So the red colored lots, Mr. Smith does his 5 lots, Mr. Jones does his lots 6 through 10. Mr. Smith, just for full clarity here, Mr. Smith he can do lots 6 through 10, but lot 10 on year 6 is actually going to encompass lots 10, 11, and 12. Does everybody see that? Because the way that our ordinance is worded, the parcel you're creating under 20 acres requires a certified survey map lot, and also the remnant. Once that remnant drops below 20 acres, it requires a CSM. So on year 6, Mr. Smith can do lots 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the remainder, which would be lot 10, 11, and 12, would have to be all of lot 10. And then on year 11, lot 10 could be split further into lots 10, 11, and 12. So does everybody understand that? Because eventually that remnant gets below 20 and it's going to need to be accounted for as a CSM lot. So now Mr. Smith, you know, so we're on year 11 here. He's sitting at 12 lots and, sitting at 12 lots. And he's pretty much done unless one of these landowners on Smith's piece, like say lot 8, could be further subdivided. If there was enough land there where a subdivision would result in 2 new lots being over 1 acre in size, then that would be permissible. But eventually, you know, access is going to catch up with a person and lot configuration. Whereas Jones, I mean, you can see here on year 21, he's sitting at 25 lots and he's not done. He hasn't even touched his southerly 40. Maybe that was the intention. He wants to preserve that ag land and doesn't want to further divide it. But so does everybody see this? It's option D would allow a landowner to do so many splits on their contiguous tract every 5 years. Now, of course, if we're in a zoned township, the zoning, so let's just say this scenario right here, this scenario would be in town of New Haven. We don't have any zoning. This would be permissible in the town of New Haven under option D. If this were, let's say, town of Red Cedar, and both properties, Smith and Jones, were zoned general ag, this would not be allowed. Neither one of these, this configuration would not be allowed to exist without a rezone, because Smith would have to abide by the 8-to-1 density ratio. He would only get 5 residential splits ever for his 40, and Jones would get 15. He's got 120 divided by 8. He would get 15 splits for the life of that without a rezone, of course. So I don't know how else or more, what kind of more or what further depth or detail I can go into on this. It's clear in my mind. I hope it's clear in the minds of the committee members. And if you have questions, I guess now would be the time to ask those, or if you have comments. Ultimately, you know, we need to get to one of these options as policy of this committee going forward. so we can finalize this draft and schedule a public hearing. So I will turn it back over to the chair.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
On that Smith property that's unzoned, couldn't they end up with 40 parcels? If they go like to just that 1 acre, even non-zoned townships, they can't have smaller than a 1 acre parcel for residential?
So in our, right now, currently as it stands, our land division ordinance that's on the books today, we do not regulate minimum lot size. So if somebody comes in an unzoned township and they want to make a ½ acre lot, I can't tell them it needs, I can suggest, hey, it's highly recommended you create at least 1 acre to allow for the sewer system, any improvements, the replacement system, get enough separation between your well and the septic. But at this point, it's just a recommendation. I can't require a 1 acre minimum lot size. You may remember a few months ago, as we were going through some of the lot standards in our draft ordinance, we now have a provision. So if our draft ordinance is codified, they will be required countywide, landowners will be required to have a 1 acre minimum lot size. So that is in our draft ordinance right now. So Mr. Smith, if he were in an unzoned township under our newly adopted, our draft ordinance gets adopted, he would have to comply with a 1 acre minimum lot size. That's something that has been introduced in our draft and agreed upon by this committee.
But then in option B, they'd be down to probably like 8 or like 5 lots, but they'd be 8 acres in size, correct?
No, that is a misconception. So many people, and I'll be honest, I was under that impression when Mr. Colson was introducing this years ago in the draft zoning ordinance. I was certain, well, you got to create you can do 5 lots and they can't be below 1 acre. The 8-to-1 is just the density ratio. The 8 is a divider. Okay. So the minimum lot size is still 1 acre. And so you take your 40, your tract, divide it by 8, that gives you a number, a finite number, 5, okay?
Okay.
That tells me I can do 5 parcels, but they can all be one acre if I want. I can make 2 of them 1 acre and the other 3 can be, 12 acres. It doesn't matter. The 8 is just to give me the number of parcels. That's the divider that we're using. It has nothing to do with minimum lot size.
Thank you for clearing that up for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse and then Supervisor Bartlett.
Tom, this may be inappropriate, but I've sort of struggled with this. Do you have a preference?
I
mean, you've studied this more than any of the rest of us. And your opinion is important to me. So if you're willing.
Well, I can offer some information. I'm going to stop short of saying, giving you a recommendation, because I would rather leave that up to the elected officials. I mean, I just look at the pros and cons of each one. The density is really easy to manage. It's a number. A landowner comes in this afternoon, I sit down and say, okay, you have 80 acres. We do the math. It's very simple. This is the number of splits you get. And as land gets divided, eventually you're done, you run out. It works very nice in the zone townships because now, there is a mechanism for somebody to increase the number of lots on their property, provided the rezone is supported, by the township and the county board, and this committee, of course. But I guess the thing that's really weighing on my mind too is the unzoned townships and, the people that have sizable pieces of land in those townships that are going to be, I won't use the word severely, but they're going to be limited by how many parcels they can make on their property. I guess had their township chosen to opt into county zoning, then it wouldn't be an issue. But for some reason we have, there's certainly townships that do not want to be under county zoning, and I'm not going to say that's correct or proper or incorrect. That's the choice they made, and I think it's very important that we realize the decisions we make, how they're going to impact everybody involved. Then I bring up the comp plan, right? We have a comprehensive plan that's supposed to be our philosophy going forward and our guiding principles. And which one of these options, A, B, and D, are closely supported, I guess, by our comp plan. Because again, the comp plan is supposed to be the principles that we want this county to adhere to, and these ordinances that we adopt are mechanisms for administering or implementing, I should say, the comp plan. If I look at option A, B, and D, as far as consistency with the comp plan, I would say option B is probably most consistent with the comp plan as far as, has the potential to preserve ag land, protect environmentally sensitive areas. Option B certainly would do that, whereas A and D would not do that quite so much. It's a tough decision, and I don't want to say that one option is certainly better than the other. They all have their advantages and they all have disadvantages. I guess something else that I just want to bring up in the discussion that has been brought to my attention over the years and again real recently, and this may factor into your decision if I go to option B. So this is going to come up. It has come up in the past, and it's certainly going to come up in the future if we go with option B. Is what happens. So I own this 80 acres and I've maxed it all out. I've done my 10 lots, and 10 years from now, I want to sell all this undeveloped land, and Supervisor Bjork buys it from me. I don't disclose to him at the time of sale that he can never build on here or use this for residential purpose. And he is oblivious to that fact. He's buying this land with the thought that down the road, he's going to put a retirement, just disregard there's a home on here right now. So it's all vacant land. He's going to put his retirement home and maybe create 2 or 3 parcels for his kids to build on. He finds out after he buys it that the residential portion of this, the residential aspect of this 80 acres is gone. It's all been used up in these 10 lots. I didn't disclose it. He's not aware of it. It's going to happen. What happens to this vacant land and protecting the public that buys it, putting them on notice that it's not going to be for residential purpose. The other thing that's an inherent problem with either option A or option C. So let's just look at option C. So I buy lot 23 out here and it's large. Let's just, looking at the size of it here, let's just say it's, 7 or 8 acres. This happens quite often. Landowners decide that, well, I don't need 7 acres. It's too much land to maintain. I don't want to mow all of this. So I'm going to divide it. Let's look at, let's say lot 19, because it has better access. So I own lot 19. I want to divide it off. And this is before lots 21 through 25 were done. So I'm aware that, the time limit is up. I'm not the original owner of this contiguous tract, but I own lot 19 now. I want to divide it equally in half and make 2 3.5 acre lots. It's a race more or less to record your documents. What if I do that and the original owner, Jones, hires a surveyor right after to make these 5 lots, and he finds out now that, well, instead of getting 5 more splits, he can only do 4 because I took one up here. I took lot 19 and made another lot out of it. So that's going to happen as well. So just some things to be aware of. I don't know. I think if the committee really, strongly believes in the comprehensive plan and is trying to adopt or pick one of these options that most closely aligns with the comp plan, I would say it's option B. But again, that's my personal opinion.
think Supervisor Bartlett had a question.
Tom answered most of it. I guess on option B there, if there is a house down there on that 40 acres where we see the picture, the person would only be able to have 9 parcels, correct? Because where that house is would be 1.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And you answered my future question for the future. So thank you.
I have a question, Tom. It's still confusing to me the way the mapping's being done. I'm just struggling to get my head around it. Again, we have on option A or option B, we have 4 splits per 5 years. And on option D, we have 5. And on option D, we have 120 acres. It doesn't seem to me like there's really that much difference. If you change B to 5, you would basically have the same number of splits over a 5-year period. Am I missing something?
Option B?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have the same number of splits over a 5-year period, but you have a finite number. You're done. You're done after a certain time, where option D, you can keep going on and on and on, because you're not limited by density. You're only limited by number of lots over time.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 25-year period, right? In both of them to get up to the maximum number of splits. Or, well, I guess item D, you can keep going, as you said.
Yeah, Jones, I mean, I'm just showing after 21 years, he's at 25 lots and he's not done. I mean, if he's got good road access, he could.
But during that 25-year period, they are essentially in the same situation in terms of the number of splits they can have every year.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And if Jones made much smaller lots up here, more in size to lots, 1 through 9, he'd have to design, a different system of roads in here that I have. But, his 25 he might have been able to get all those on maybe a 40 and just part of another 40. Right now, I'm taking up whole 80 acres for these 24, 25 lots. So in time, the larger landowners have more flexibility. They can create many more lots than Mr. Smith that has just 40 acres. He's going to run out of, he has to maintain that 1 acre minimum lot size. He has to provide access to these lots, and eventually his 40 is he's not going to be able to make any more lots out there, or the landowners that own lots are not going to want to divide their land any further. So, but it is going to take some time. It's controlled development. It's not, we're not going to get all these lots at once. And if we do, then they're going to have to use the platting process, either a county plat or a state plat.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair, I have a question to follow up on yours.
Mr. Kinnear, and then Mr. Bjork.
Okay, thank you. Now, Tom, you just said it's controlled. I would say it's slowed development rather than controlled. But the other comment is that following up on Tom's comment, we do have to have either 4 or 5 lots in a 5-year period. For example, if someone had 120 acres and it was strictly density, 8 into 120, they could put all those lots the very first year. If there was no 4 lots every 5 years or 5 lots every 5 years. So no matter where we are, no matter what we choose, that's something that would need to be in what we want. And finally, I guess Tom kind of brought this up, maybe both Toms. Are A and D, are they counter to what we're trying to do? That's a question for me, as far as the comp plan, the directional plan, the subdivision ordinance, the committees we've worked with. With that many lots slowed but uncontrolled, does that counter to what we have been working on since I've been on the PRD? Thank you.
I think Gary had a comment.
Yes, I have one comment and then a question. And the comment is, when we done our comprehensive plan, I think looking throughout the whole, all the townships, keeping the rural characteristics was a very high on all the surveys. And the other question is, can you create a parcel for a non-residential? Say that I want to put some grain bins on a 5-acre parcel. Would that go against the number of lots that can be created?
You could designate that, Gary, as an outlot with a restriction on there that is not, this lot is being created for, agricultural purposes, and no residential dwelling shall be placed on here. That would be very easy to do. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
And
if I
that wouldn't
could.
count against you. Okay.
Okay, Supervisor Kinnear, and then
Bob
Yeah.
Colson.
Okay, Supervisor Kinnear first, and then Mr. Colson.
So just to clarify what you answered there, Mr. Carlson. So if you used up your allotted lots in a density based, you could still create an outlot after that? Is that correct?
Yes, because the lots we're dealing with are for residential purposes. Mhm.
Okay,
Mr.
that's an
Colson.
interesting question, Gary. I never would have thought of it.
Mr. Colson.
A couple things about option D, and it probably pertain also to option A. One of the reasons that the committee created the general ag district when it did was because in the old ordinance, the previous ordinance, R1, R2, R3, people were allowed to create, and each of those districts, the minimum lot size was different. R1, I believe, was 1, and then 2, and then 5. But anyway, they had a lot designation, and what we saw when we had those districts was that in the R1, people were using that really for a residential district. They could create as many parcels as they can, and it was still considered ag. And the committee had some issues with that we really want to keep our agricultures, generally agriculture, and allow some development. Lot D, or option D, kind of goes back contrary to the reason that we created the density base, is because option D pretty much says this is a residential district. You can create as many parcels as you want in an ag district, and yeah, it's unfair for those that are unzoned, that they don't get that same option. But we struggle with that a lot in the plan, that the plan has to strike a balance between individual rights and the rights of the county as a whole, and that's a hard balance to take into account. The other thing on the outlot is, I don't know that we would be able to issue a permit because the outlot says no structures, and so creating outlot in option D, and then for someone wanting to build farm structures on there, I'd have to go back and see if that would be even permitted. I think the zoning says no structures in an outlot. So.
Any other questions? I'm just curious about, Tom, why option D has 5 lots per 5 years and option A and B have 4.
I put the 5 in there just because the committee, I think it was 2 meetings ago, questioned that, where did this number 4 come from? While I don't know the answer to that, I suspect it's because by law, you can do up to 4 lots on a certified survey map. And it's maybe a convenient number. If we were going to go to, allow 5 per 40 in a 5-year period, the landowner and surveyor would have to do 2 separate certified survey maps, which isn't a problem. It adds some more expense, more drafting time, another review fee at the county. And then the question came up, well, could we change it? Are we bound by state statute? Do we have leeway or flexibility to increase this to say 5? And we certainly do. That we're not tied by statute. It was just a number that the 4 is a number we've been using traditionally over time. So in option D, in here, Nick and I changed that to 5 just because we feel that was the direction we thought the committee wanted to head. So that this 5, and I apologize if it's confusing, I maybe should have just put 4 there, but we put 5 at what we perceived as the direction the committee wanted to head. So you could come back up to these other ones here and change this to, obviously they would all be consistent. So we either use 4 for all 3 options or we use 5. And I apologize for the confusion there.
I think the discussion probably was confusing when we discussed it, but my initial question had been, what if we had option B as 5 instead of 4, which wouldn't change the configuration, but would give you
1 extra lot every 5 years.
Right.
So instead of taking 11 years in this scenario to get 10 lots here, because
You
right
could do
now,
it in 10 years. In 10 years.
right, on year 6, I would do lots 5 through 8, and then lots 9 and 10 would have to wait till year 11. Whereas if we changed the 4 to a 5, I could do lots 1 through 5, and then lots 6. So on year 6, I could be done here. I could do the same thing, and it would take 5 less years to do it, 6 instead of 11. And
that aligns a little bit better with zoning. At least it's 5 only because a lot of things that we get come in full 40s, and so at least it would be more aligned with zoning if it was 5 instead of 4.
I agree, because right now Bob and I deal with a lot of people. They come in, Bob tells them, well, you have 40, you can do 5 lots. And I say, well, wait a minute, you can only do 4 right now. And then 5 years from now, you can do your last one. And, it's confusing to people. It's really not that confusing, but when it's your first time doing this, it's like, well, I have one county agency telling me I can do it. I have another one saying I can't. And it would be more consistent if we did go with the 5. I certainly agree with that and would support it. Yeah, it makes sense.
Well, my thought too is that it might be a little more palatable, make option B a little more palatable to the towns if the landowner had a little more, it just provided a little more option and timeliness to their development plans. Any other questions? Any sense of the direction that we want to go here?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'll just put in my 2 cents. I sort of throughout this discussion, as much as I struggle to understand it, I have always been supportive of option B because it feels to me like it is much more consistent with our comprehensive and directional plans.
Any other comments?
Supervisor Bjork agrees with Ms. Morehouse completely. And what I like best about it is you can put your 10 lots in that 80 acres in just 140. So you aren't disrupting like the whole 80. So that's why I really like option B. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Any other comments?
Supervisor Kinnear here, and I agree with both of the previous supervisors for their reasoning too.
Mr. Chair, if I could, one other comment.
Yeah.
At least with, option B, if you go that route, it aligns with zoning, and zoning, general ag, it does allow you to create non-ag parcels, so that you could create a parcel and be able to put structures on it because it's an ag parcel and not a residential parcel. So we do recognize in the GA district the difference between residential and ag in terms of density. So just so we're clear on that.
Okay. Any other comments? Tom, would you, I mean, we could take a vote, or I think, my personal feeling is that B is the preferred option. We can have a motion, or we can just task you with the sense of the committee that we would like to go with option B. What would you prefer?
I don't necessarily think we need a vote. I mean,
Right.
if somebody's in strong opposition to it, then now they better speak up now. Now's
Right.
your chance. If not,
That's what I think too. Is there, so the option sort of on the table for consensus is option B. Yeah, we'll come back for further discussion. Is there any strong opinion about that? Okay, then let's go ahead with that, Tom, and have that be the basis of our.
Okay, Corp Counsel and I do have some work to do on option B. There's some additional considerations. I don't want to get into all that right now, but just some other more verbiage we need to add to this section. We've held off on doing that for obvious reasons.
Yep.
Biggest one that, we weren't sure which option was going to be selected. So we will come back. Hopefully we'll have some time here. It's a very short turnaround, but hopefully we can come back in 2 weeks with some, I guess, firmed up verbiage here for option B. So what I'm hearing then is we will remove completely option A and option D from our draft. We will concentrate on option B. We'll bring that back with some additional verbiage here for some further discussion before we schedule a public hearing.
Supervisor Bartlett.
Will that be? Go ahead.
Supervisor Bartlett and then Supervisor Kinnear.
Okay, I trying to understand this just a little bit more, and I agree that this is follows what our plan is and stuff the closest, but when we're talking contiguous track, what happens, say, if they have 160 acres or 240 acres or 300 acres? We have some landowners out there that have a fair amount of land that is all hooked together, at least in some areas. Does that still mean that they can only do that 8-to-1 ratio? So like if they have 240 acres, they could still only have 8 parcels.
Nope, you take the 240 and divide it by 8.
Okay, all right.
So they would have 30 parcels if my math is correct. The more land you have, the more splits. It's proportional.
All right.
So
all right.
Yeah. So from very simplistic terms, it's fair. It's equitable. I guess equitable is the word I'm looking for. The more land you have, the more splits. It's a ratio.
Okay. Yep. I missed that.
But so they get those 30 splits, and a very important point I want to make, they get the 30 splits on the 240 acres, but doesn't mean they can do them all right now. They would have to do them 5, if we go with that number, 5 every 5 years.
Right.
So you do the math, it would take, over 30 years to accomplish that by certified survey map.
Well, I guess I was thinking of an on-zone township like New Haven with people moving in from the Twin Cities. It seems like there's more and more people moving in all the time, that I was thinking that, over 40 years or 60 years, how much development. Okay, I understand. So.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
One thing we touched on at the last meeting that I think warrants further discussion right now by the committee, as we remember the discussion we had on the small parcels that are already existing. So I have a 10-acre parcel. Well, if I do the math, 10 divided by 8, I don't get any splits. It can't be divided. And the way the zoning ordinance is set up, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, if you're between 8 and 16, we allow, or the county allows that parcel to be split once. It can be divided. So that's a consideration, I think is warranted in option B. And this is some of this additional verbiage that I mentioned we need to incorporate in here. Right now, we have this in here, it mirrors the zoning ordinance. So any fractional number resulting from the calculation, which is at least 80%, shall be rounded up to the next whole number. Contiguous tracts existing prior to the adoption of this ordinance, which are greater than 8 and smaller than 16, may be subdivided to create one additional lot. You may mention I had a figure here last time. I want to say it was 2,500 parcels, I believe, in the unzoned towns right now that are less than 8 acres, that under this scenario could never be further divided. And I know there was some discussion, maybe concern by the committee, that that number should be reduced. So I guess if there's any suggestions, now would be a good time to make those, so we could incorporate that into our additional language for this option. We certainly could go down to something smaller. I guess you got to decide what is the smallest parcel you want, and then if you double it. So I mean, if you allow somebody to divide a 4-acre parcel equally in half, and not to say they're going to divide it equally, but because they would have to comply with the 1-acre minimum lot size. I guess I'll just throw this out for conversation if we want to have that conversation now. And it's perfectly fine, I guess, waiting until the next meeting, but I'm trying to streamline this process, because ultimately we want to get this public hearing, scheduled and get this ordinance codified. And the more we can do at each meeting, I think is in everybody's best interest. So any questions on that, or do we want to have a discussion on that at this point, or wait until the next meeting?
Any comments? I guess we'll consider it, and probably when you put it in there, we'll talk about it next time.
Okay.
Chairman Quinn, if
Yes.
I could. I think Tom Carlson, I think that if you go back to option B, one thing that wasn't talked about, which was the reason for the timeline, is that this would take 5 and let's say that is 5 and 5 years. This would take 10 years. However, if a person wanted to go the platting process, they could create all of those parcels sooner. And we didn't talk about that. And that's an option that was available in all of the scenarios. The reason to leave the time limit in there is so that we don't lose the ability as a county to have plats and to have those reviewed with different standards.
And is that in both on-zoned and zoned townships?
Correct. And just so we're clear, the platting option doesn't allow you to get more lots. The density, I mean, if we're going to go density, the density is what the density is. It's just if I want to do all 10 of these lots right now, because I have buyers for them, and I don't want to wait 5 years, I would go the platting route.
Right.
The plat is not a mechanism by which I can bypass density and say, well, I want to do 30 lots, I'll just do a plat. No, you still have to comply with the 8-to-1 density ratio. The platting process just allows me to take up all my density immediately and not have to phase it out over 5-year periods.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee?
One question,
Yeah.
Tom,
Yes.
tell me about the plotting that you can do it like, at one time. What are the major restrictions that you have to follow to have a plot?
A plat?
A plat, excuse me.
Well, plat has more, we can require more things on a plat, and typically we do. So in the past, we've required engineered road plans. So if we go back to, this would be a good discussion point. So if I'm going to do this by certified survey map, under our current draft, this road that's coming in here would only be it could be a private road for up to 4 lots. So lots 10, 11, 23, and 24 could have a private road in here. But once we serve more than 4 lots, private roads are not allowed. And so private roads are only allowed on minor subdivisions. And we do have an exception on majors, where if the local municipality, so the township, is not going to accept the dedication, then we would allow a private road. Otherwise, private roads are only allowed in minors, certified survey maps, and they can only serve up to a maximum of 4 lots. So once these 4 lots were served, any more, I would have, if I create any more than those 4 lots, I would have to build this road to town standards and have the township take it over, and it'd be dedicated as a public road maintained by the township. So to answer your question, if somebody's going to come in and do a plat on this, so a certified survey map, we don't, require engineered road plans, soil erosion control report, different things, soil borings, right? We're not going to require soil borings as part of the minor land division process. We had quite a few discussions on that in the recent past here. So now if I'm going to come in and do all these lots in one shot, and I'm required to do a plat to accomplish that, the county's going to require an engineered, first of all, this is going to be a dedicated road here. It's going to need engineered road plans. We're going to need a soil erosion control report. We're going to require 1 soil boring on each one of these 24 lots. And that's something that is right in our ordinance. So we have greater control over what's happening in the review process. There's more requirements at the time of submittal than there would be on a minor land division, which is a certified survey map. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
Okay.
And the plat, would come before this committee for approval. Certified survey maps do not. So the committee would have a chance to review all platted subdivisions, whether they're a county plat or a state plat.
Would that have to have like a stormwater control too?
A county or state plat would, yes. It's not a requirement, but it's something, the way our ordinance is worded, it's something that the department in our judgment can require. And we historically have required those documents, a grading plan, engineered road plan, soil erosion control report. Yes.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Okay. Good discussion. Anything else? All right.
Are we bringing back this B with 5 or 4 acres? I mean, 5 or 4 lots for 5 years.
Well, my understanding is we'd be coming back with 5 lots in the contiguous tract in a 5-year period. That's my understanding. Is
that okay with everybody? Okay. Well, that's what we'll come back with then. I think that's it. Have we gone through our agenda? I think so. Are there any announcements? I guess our next meeting is the 23rd. So with that, we are adjourned. Thanks everybody for a good discussion.
Stay well, everyone.